High school student asks Keanu Reeves for internship. Next day he lands a movie role. Ethan Parker adjusted the strap of his worn-out backpack, his gaze glued to the cracked pavement beneath his sneakers. The late afternoon sun was warm on his back, but his thoughts were a storm. At 17, his dreams of working in Hollywood seemed like little more than childish fantasies. Growing up in a modest neighborhood far from the glitz and glamour of Los Angeles, Ethan had spent countless nights watching behind-the-scenes documentaries, imagining himself on a movie set. But reality had a way of reminding him that such dreams weren't meant for kids like him. His route home from school passed by the city square, a place that, on any other day, was unremarkable. But today, it was alive with energy. Bright lights, towering cameras, and a crowd of curious onlookers surrounded what looked like the set of a major movie production. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he caught sight of an unmistakable figure in the center of the chaos, Keanu Reeves. Ethan froze in his tracks, his mouth slightly open. He'd always admired Keanu, not just for his acting but for the stories of his kindness and humility that circulated online. And now, here he was, just a few feet away, dressed in a leather jacket and casually chatting with a crew member. "Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to get closer?" A voice from the crowd teased, snapping Ethan out of his daze. He hesitated, a war raging in his mind. Part of him wanted to keep walking, to avoid embarrassing himself. But another part, a bolder, more daring part, urged him to do something he'd never done before. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. If he didn't act now, he'd regret it forever. Taking a deep breath, Ethan tightened his grip on the strap of his backpack and stepped forward. The crowd parted slightly, and before he knew it, he was standing at the edge of the set, just a few feet away from Keanu. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves?" Ethan's voice came out quieter than he'd intended, barely audible over the hum of the set. To his surprise, Keanu turned around immediately, his expression kind and approachable. "Hey there," he said, tilting his head slightly. "What's up?" Ethan swallowed hard, his palms sweating. I just wanted to say I'm a huge fan." And, he hesitated, his nerves threatening to get the better of him. But then he remembered why he was here. "And I was wondering if you'd consider letting me intern on this set. I've always dreamed of working in movies." For a moment, Keanu looked at him, his brow furrowing slightly as if he were considering Ethan's request. Ethan braced himself for polite rejection or, worse, outright dismissal. But instead, Keanu's face broke into a warm smile. "An internship, huh?" he said, crossing his arms. "That's a bold ask. What's your name?" "Ethan," he stammered, caught off guard by Keanu's genuine interest. "Well, Ethan," Keanu said, "I like your guts. Tell you what, why don't you come by the set tomorrow? I'll introduce you to some folks, and you can see how things work around here." Ethan blinked, sure he had misheard. "Wait, really?" Keanu nodded. "Sure. Just be here at 8 in the morning and don't be late. Got it?" Yes, absolutely. "Thank you so much, Mr. Reeves," Ethan said, his voice a mix of disbelief and excitement. "Keanu," the actor corrected, his smile widening. "And don't thank me yet. Let's see how you do." Ethan could hardly sleep that night. His mind raced with possibilities, replaying the brief interaction with Keanu over and over. By the time his alarm went off at 6 a.m., he was already awake, dressed in his best outfit, a simple button-up shirt and jeans, and ready to leave. When he arrived at the set, the crew was already buzzing with activity. True to his word, Keanu greeted him near the main entrance, a cup of coffee in hand. "Good morning, Ethan," Keanu said. "Glad you made it." Ethan grinned nervously. "I wouldn't miss this for anything." Keanu gestured toward a group of crew members setting up lights. "All right, here's the deal. Today, you're shadowing the crew. Watch, listen, and learn. If you have questions, ask. And if someone gives you a task, do it to the best of your ability. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir," Ethan said, his voice brimming with determination. Keanu chuckled. "Just Keanu. Now go ahead. I'll check in on you later." The day flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Ethan followed the lighting crew as they adjusted massive rigs, marveled at the intricacy of the set design, and even got a chance to sit in on a few takes. He soaked up every detail, asking questions when appropriate and jumping in to help whenever he could. At one point, a small crisis erupted when a piece of equipment malfunctioned. While the crew scrambled to fix it, Ethan noticed a loose wire that seemed to be the culprit. Hesitant at first, he decided to speak up. Excuse me," he said, pointing to the wire. "I think that might be the problem." The crew chief glanced at him, skeptical, but checked the wire anyway. Sure enough, Ethan was right. Within minutes, the equipment was back up and running. "Nice catch, kid," the crew chief said, clapping him on the back. "Not bad for your first day." Ethan beamed, feeling a surge of pride. As the day wound down, Ethan found himself standing near Keanu, who was reviewing the script with the director. When their conversation ended, Keanu turned to Ethan, his expression thoughtful. "So, how was your first day?" he asked. "Amazing," Ethan said, his excitement bubbling over. "I learned so much. Thank you again for giving me this chance." Keanu smiled. "You earned it, Ethan. You showed up and you gave it your all. That's what matters." Before Ethan could respond, the director approached them, looking slightly stressed. "Keanu, we've got a problem," he said. "The actor for one of the scenes tomorrow just dropped out. It's a small role, but we're in a bind." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Small role, huh? What's the part?" The director pulled out the script and explained the scene, a brief but pivotal moment involving a high school student delivering an emotional monologue. As the director spoke, Keanu's eyes flicked to Ethan, an idea forming in his mind. "Ethan," Keanu said suddenly, his tone serious. "How do you feel about acting?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Me? I've never—" "Doesn't matter," Keanu interrupted. "You've got the right look, and I have a feeling you can pull it off. What do you say?" Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding. The idea was terrifying, but the opportunity was too incredible to pass up. Summoning every ounce of courage, he nodded. "I'll do it." The next morning, Ethan arrived at the set earlier than anyone else, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. The reality of what he had agreed to do was finally sinking in. He had no experience acting, not in a professional sense, at least. His only training came from mimicking characters in movies he loved, alone in his room. Keanu had assured him that it was a small role, but the pressure felt monumental. What if he messed up? What if he forgot his lines or looked ridiculous on camera? Ethan shook his head, trying to push the doubts aside. He couldn't back out now. As the crew began to arrive, Ethan was ushered into the makeup trailer. The makeup artist, a kind woman named Sarah, chatted with him as she worked, sensing his nerves. "First time on set as an actor?" she asked, applying a light foundation to his face. "Yeah," Ethan admitted, fidgeting with his hands. "I didn't even expect to be here. This is all surreal." Sarah smiled. "You're going to do great. Just remember to breathe and take it one step at a time. Keanu wouldn't have suggested you if he didn't believe in you." Her words offered a small measure of comfort, but Ethan still felt the weight of the moment. When he stepped out of the trailer, Keanu was waiting for him, dressed in his own costume for the day. "You ready?" Keanu asked, his tone calm and encouraging. "Not really," Ethan admitted with a nervous laugh. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That's normal. The nerves mean you care. Just focus on the moment. Don't think about the cameras or the crew, just focus on the story you're telling." Ethan nodded, trying to absorb Keanu's advice. He followed him to the set, where the director was already setting up the scene. The setting was a high school hallway, meticulously constructed with lockers, bulletin boards, and fluorescent lighting. Ethan's character was supposed to deliver a heartfelt monologue to his best friend, confronting him about a betrayal. The director, a sharp-eyed man named Victor, handed Ethan a copy of the script and explained the scene. "This moment is the emotional turning point for your character," Victor said. "You've just found out that your best friend went behind your back and ruined something important to you. You're hurt, but you're also angry. The key is to make the audience feel that conflict." Ethan nodded, his hands shaking slightly as he clutched the script. "I'll do my best," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Victor clapped him on the back. "That's all I ask." The first take was rough. Ethan stumbled over his lines, his voice too quiet to be picked up clearly by the boom mic. He felt the weight of the crew's eyes on him, and his nerves only worsened with each mistake. By the end of the scene, his face was flushed, and he couldn't bring himself to meet anyone's gaze. "It's okay, kid," Victor said, his tone patient. "First takes are always rough. Let's try it again." Ethan nodded, though his confidence was quickly dwindling. As he prepared for the next take, Keanu approached him, pulling him aside. "Hey," Keanu said softly. "You're thinking too much. Forget about the cameras, forget about getting it perfect. Just think about the words. What do they mean to you? What do you want the other character to feel?" Ethan took a deep breath, nodding. "But I'll try." "Good," Keanu said with a small smile. "You've got this." On the second take, something shifted. Ethan focused on the words, on the emotions behind them, rather than the mechanics of delivering them. He thought about times in his own life when he had felt hurt or betrayed, channeling those feelings into his performance. The shaky uncertainty in his voice gave way to raw, authentic emotion. By the time he delivered the final line of the monologue, "I trusted you, and you threw it all away," the set was silent. Even the crew, who had seen countless takes from professional actors, seemed taken aback by the sincerity in Ethan's performance. "Cut," Victor called, his voice breaking the spell. He turned to Ethan with an approving nod. "That was it. That's the take." Ethan blinked, hardly daring to believe what he'd just heard. "Really? Really?" Victor said. "You've got something, kid. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Keanu walked over, a proud smile on his face. "Told you," he said. "You just needed to trust yourself." Ethan felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged, not just on the set, but in the world of film. It was a feeling he would never forget. After the scene wrapped, Ethan stayed on set for the rest of the day, helping out wherever he could. Though his role had been small, it had left a big impression on the crew. By the end of the shoot, he was no longer just the kid Keanu brought to set. He was Ethan Parker, the boy who had taken a chance and delivered a performance that surprised everyone. As the sun began to set, Ethan found himself sitting on the steps of a trailer, exhausted but exhilarated. Keanu joined him, handing him a bottle of water. "You did good today," Keanu said, taking a seat beside him. "Thanks," Ethan said, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "I don't even know how to process all of this." Keanu chuckled. "It's a lot, isn't it? But you handled it like a pro." Ethan hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind all day. "Why did you do this? Why did you give me a chance?" Keanu leaned back, looking thoughtful. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said. "When I was starting out, I didn't have much to my name. But there were people who believed in me, who gave me opportunities when I didn't think I deserved them. That's what this industry should be about, lifting each other up." Ethan nodded, his admiration for Keanu growing even deeper. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." Keanu smiled. "You've got the talent, Ethan. Now it's up to you to decide what you do with it." The next day, Ethan returned to his normal routine, school, homework, and daydreaming about what had happened on set. He didn't expect anything more to come of it. After all, it was just a small role in one scene. But to his surprise, the experience had already begun to change his life. A week later, Victor called him with an offer. "We're wrapping up the film, but I wanted to let you know, we showed your scene to the studio execs and they loved it. They're interested in bringing you on for a bigger role in one of our upcoming projects." Ethan nearly dropped his phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Victor said. "Keanu put in a good word for you too. So, what do you say?" Ethan's mind raced. This was everything he had ever dreamed of, and it was happening faster than he could have imagined. Taking a deep breath, he said the only thing he could. "I'm in." Ethan stared at his phone, the reality of Victor's words sinking in. He had just been offered an opportunity to work on another project. Something bigger, something more than he had ever imagined. His heart raced as he replayed the conversation in his head, hardly able to believe what had just happened. The next day at school, Ethan felt like he was floating. His usual routine, walking the halls, sitting through classes, and eating lunch in the cafeteria, suddenly felt surreal. He hadn't told anyone about what had happened on the movie set, partly because he wasn't sure they'd believe him, and partly because it still felt like a fragile dream that might shatter if he spoke about it too soon. "Hey, Earth," to Ethan, his best friend Mark said, snapping his fingers in front of Ethan's face during lunch. "You've been zoned out all day. What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, unsure of how to respond. But then he realized he couldn't keep this to himself forever. "Okay," he said, leaning in and lowering his voice. "You're not going to believe this, but I met Keanu Reeves." Mark blinked, his sandwich halfway to his mouth. "Wait, what? The Keanu Reeves? John Wick? Neo? That Keanu Reeves?" Ethan nodded, his excitement bubbling over. "Yeah, and get this, I got to be on set with him. I even acted in a scene for the movie." Mark's jaw dropped. "Are you messing with me right now? Because if you are, this is a really cruel joke." "I'm serious," Ethan said, pulling out his phone and showing Mark a picture he'd taken on set. It was a candid shot of him standing next to Keanu, both of them smiling. Mark stared at the photo, his disbelief slowly giving way to awe. "Dude, this is insane. How did this even happen?" Ethan launched into the story, recounting everything from the moment he worked up the courage to approach Keanu to the unexpected opportunity to act in the movie. By the time he finished, Mark was shaking his head in amazement. "You're living the dream," Mark said. "What happens next?" Ethan smiled, a mixture of excitement and nerves. "That's the crazy part. The director called me yesterday and said they want me for another role. A bigger one." Mark let out a low whistle. "Wow. Looks like Hollywood's calling your name, man. A new chapter begins." Ethan spent the next few weeks preparing for his new role. The studio sent over a script and set up a series of virtual meetings with the director and other cast members. For the first time, Ethan was stepping into the world he had only dreamed of, and while it was exhilarating, it was also overwhelming. Keanu, true to his word, stayed in touch and offered advice. They spoke on the phone a few times, and each conversation left Ethan feeling more confident. "Remember, Ethan," Keanu said during one of their calls, "acting isn't about pretending. It's about finding the truth in a moment and letting yourself feel it. Be honest, and the audience will believe you." Those words stuck with Ethan as he practiced his lines in front of the mirror, experimenting with different ways to deliver each scene. His parents, who had been skeptical at first, began to see how serious he was about this opportunity. They even helped him rehearse, reading the other characters' lines and offering feedback. "Not bad," his dad said one evening, nodding approvingly. "You've got a natural talent for this, son." Ethan beamed, grateful for their support. He knew this wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had believed in him, from his parents to Keanu to the crew on set. He wanted to make them proud. On the big screen, filming for Ethan's new role began a month later. This time, he wasn't just a nervous teenager shadowing the crew, he was part of the cast. The production was bigger and more elaborate than anything he had ever imagined. The set was a sprawling recreation of a futuristic city, complete with towering skyscrapers, bustling streets, and intricate costumes. Ethan's role was that of a young hacker who becomes an unlikely ally to the film's protagonist, played by none other than Keanu. Their characters shared several scenes, and Ethan found himself both excited and terrified at the prospect of acting alongside someone he admired so much. On the first day of filming, Ethan arrived early, eager to make a good impression. As he walked onto the set, he spotted Keanu, who greeted him with a warm smile. "Ready for round 2? Keanu asked, clapping him on the shoulder. "Ready as I'll ever be," Ethan replied, trying to keep his nerves in check. Their first scene together involved a tense confrontation in a dimly lit alley. Ethan's character, unsure whether he could trust Keanu's, had to deliver a series of lines laced with suspicion and defiance. It was a challenging scene, but Ethan had spent hours rehearsing and felt prepared. When the camera started rolling, Ethan focused on Keanu, letting the emotions of the scene guide him. He delivered his lines with intensity, his voice steady and confident. Keanu responded in kind, elevating the scene with his own performance. By the time the director called cut, Ethan was breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "That was great," Keanu said, grinning. "You're a natural." Ethan couldn't help but smile. Coming from Keanu, those words meant the world. A star on the rise. As filming progressed, Ethan found himself growing more comfortable in his role. The cast and crew welcomed him with open arms, offering guidance and encouragement at every turn. He formed close friendships with several of the other actors, who were impressed by his dedication and humility. "You've got something special, Ethan," one of them said during a break. "Keep working hard, and you're going to go far." Ethan's confidence grew with each scene he filmed, and by the end of the production, he felt like he had truly found his place. When the movie wrapped, the cast and crew gathered for a celebratory dinner, where the director gave a heartfelt speech. "This film is about trust, courage, and taking chances," the director said, raising a glass. "And no one embodies those qualities more than Ethan Parker. Let's give him a round of applause for stepping up and delivering an incredible performance." The room erupted into cheers, and Ethan felt his face flush with pride. He glanced at Keanu, who gave him a subtle nod of approval. In that moment, Ethan realized just how far he had come and how much further he wanted to go. The premiere. Months later, the movie premiered to a sold-out audience. Ethan attended the event with his parents, who were beaming with pride as they walked the red carpet. Cameras flashed, reporters called out questions, and fans lined the streets, eager to catch a glimpse of the stars. Inside the theater, Ethan sat next to Keanu, his heart pounding as the lights dimmed and the movie began. Watching himself on the big screen was a surreal experience, and he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and disbelief. The audience laughed, gasped, and cheered at all the right moments, and by the time the credits rolled, the room erupted into a standing ovation. After the screening, Ethan was approached by several industry professionals, each eager to discuss future opportunities. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. "You're a star in the making," one producer said, shaking his hand. "Keep this up, and you'll be headlining your own films in no time." As Ethan's career began to take off, he never forgot where it all started. He stayed in touch with Keanu, who continued to mentor him and offer advice. He also made a point of giving back, visiting schools and community centers to talk to students about following their dreams. "Don't be afraid to take a chance," he told them. "Sometimes, all it takes is one bold move to change your life." For Ethan, that bold move had been asking Keanu Reeves for an internship. And while the journey hadn't been easy, it had been worth every step. As he stood on the set of his next project, surrounded by cameras and lights, Ethan smiled to himself. He was no longer just a kid with a dream, he was living it. The days following the premiere were a whirlwind for Ethan. His phone rang constantly with calls from agents, casting directors, and producers eager to collaborate with him. Offers began to pour in for roles in upcoming films and television series. It felt surreal, like stepping into a new world he'd only dreamed of. But amidst the chaos, Ethan remained grounded. He often thought about his conversation with Keanu on the movie set, the words that had stayed with him. "It's not about pretending. It's about finding the truth." He wanted to approach every opportunity with the same humility and sincerity that had brought him this far. Ethan decided to accept a role in an indie film that focused on a deeply personal story. It was a departure from the action-packed blockbuster he just completed, but something about the script resonated with him. The film was about a young man who reconnects with his estranged father after years of misunderstanding, a story that mirrored some of Ethan's own experiences. Before filming began, Ethan reached out to Keanu for advice. "Keanu," he said during a phone call, "this role feels different. It's not about big action scenes or dramatic monologues. It's quiet, emotional. I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Keanu chuckled softly. "Ethan, you don't need to be ready. You just need to be honest. Let yourself feel the emotions of the character, and don't be afraid to bring your own experiences into it. That's what makes a performance real." Ethan nodded, though Keanu couldn't see him. "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. And remember," Keanu added, "I'm just a call away if you need anything." Diving into the role. The indie film was an entirely different experience from the blockbuster set. The cast and crew were smaller, the budget tighter, but the passion on set was palpable. Ethan quickly bonded with the actor playing his father, a seasoned performer named Henry who took him under his wing. "You remind me of myself when I was starting out," Henry said one afternoon during a break between scenes. Eager, a little scared, but full of potential. Keep that spark. It's what makes you special. The scenes were emotionally demanding, requiring Ethan to tap into feelings he wasn't used to expressing. In one particularly intense moment, his character confronted his father about abandoning the family, delivering lines that hit close to home. Ethan felt his chest tighten as he spoke, his voice cracking with genuine emotion. When the director called cut, the set fell silent for a moment before the crew broke into applause. Ethan wiped his eyes, surprised by how deeply the scene had affected him. "You okay?" Henry asked, clapping him on the back. Ethan nodded, smiling through his tears. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to get it." Balancing the spotlight. As Ethan's star continued to rise, he found himself navigating the challenges of fame. Paparazzi began to follow him, snapping photos of him at coffee shops and on walks with friends. His social media accounts exploded with followers, many of whom left supportive messages but others who weren't so kind. Ethan tried not to let the negativity affect him, but it wasn't always easy. One evening, after reading a particularly harsh comment, he called Keanu, seeking guidance. "Keanu, how do you deal with it?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "The scrutiny, the criticism. Sometimes it feels like no matter what I do, someone's going to tear me down." Keanu's voice was calm as always. "It's tough, Ethan. There's no way around that. But remember, the people who really matter, the ones who know you, who care about you, they see the truth. Focus on them, not the noise." Ethan took a deep breath, letting Keanu's words sink in. "Thanks," he said. "I needed to hear that." "Anytime," Keanu replied. "And don't forget, you're not alone in this." A chance to give back. As Ethan settled into his new life, he began to think about how he could use his platform to make a difference. Inspired by Keanu's generosity and his own experiences, he decided to start a mentorship program for aspiring young actors from underprivileged backgrounds. The program, named Breaking Through, offered workshops, resources, and opportunities for students who, like Ethan, dreamed of making it in Hollywood but lacked the means. The first workshop was held at a community center in his hometown. Ethan arrived early, helping to set up chairs and equipment. As the students began to filter in, he saw a mix of excitement and nervousness on their faces, a reflection of how he had felt when he first stepped onto a movie set. "Welcome, everyone," Ethan said, addressing the group. "I'm so glad you're here. A few years ago, I was sitting where you are now, wondering if my dreams were even possible. And then one moment changed everything for me. I'm here to tell you that those moments can happen for you too." The workshop was a resounding success. Ethan shared stories from his journey, answered questions, and even led an improv session that had the students laughing and cheering. By the end of the day, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing he had planted seeds of hope in others. As the students filed out, one boy lingered behind, clutching a notebook. He approached Ethan hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," the boy said. "I've always wanted to act, but I didn't think someone like me could. Now I think maybe I can." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You absolutely can," he said. "And I'll be here to help you." The next big step. Months later, Ethan received an offer that marked a new milestone in his career, a leading role in a major studio film. The project was ambitious, combining elements of drama and action, and the script was one of the most compelling he had ever read. Accepting the role meant stepping into the spotlight in a way he never had before, but Ethan knew he was ready. When production began, Ethan threw himself into the role, working closely with the director and immersing himself in the character. He even underwent rigorous physical training for the action scenes, determined to deliver a performance that would do justice to the story. Keanu, true to form, visited the set one day to offer his support. Watching Ethan work, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The nervous teenager who had once approached him on a busy set had grown into a confident and talented actor, earning the respect of everyone around him. "You've come a long way, Ethan," Keanu said as they chatted during a break. "And this is just the beginning." Ethan smiled, his gratitude evident. "I wouldn't be here without you." Keanu shook his head. "You earned this. All I did was open a door. You walked through it, a full circle moment." When the film premiered, it was met with critical acclaim, with many praising Ethan's performance as both captivating and heartfelt. For Ethan, the highlight of the evening came during the afterparty, when he spotted a young boy nervously approaching him, much like he had approached Keanu years earlier. "Mr. Parker?" the boy said, his voice trembling. "I just wanted to say I'm a big fan. I was wondering if you had any advice for someone who wants to be an actor." Ethan knelt to the boy's level, his smile warm. "The best advice I can give you is to believe in yourself," he said. "And don't be afraid to take a chance. Sometimes, all it takes is one bold move to change your life." As the boy smiled shyly and thanked him, Ethan felt a wave of emotion. He had come full circle, from a dreamer seeking inspiration to someone who could now inspire others. That night, as he stood on the balcony of his hotel, looking out at the city lights, Ethan thought about everything that had led him to this moment. The courage it took to approach Keanu, the kindness that had been shown to him, and the hard work that had followed. He knew his journey was far from over, but he also knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. And for that, he was endlessly grateful. Ethan leaned back in his chair during an interview for a major entertainment magazine. The bright lights of the studio made him sweat slightly, but he maintained his calm demeanor, answering questions with a mix of humility and confidence. The journalist had just asked about his rise to fame and how he managed to keep himself grounded. He thought back to his first moments on a set, his nervousness as he fumbled through lines, and the steady hand Keanu Reeves had offered him at every turn. Ethan smiled, the memory vivid. "I think it's about remembering why you started. At the end of the day, it's the work that matters. Fame can be loud, but it's not the thing that drives me." The journalist nodded, leaning forward. "You've quickly become a name to watch in Hollywood, but what's next for you? Any dream roles?" Ethan paused, considering the question. He could feel the weight of expectations, but rather than let it overwhelm him, he spoke from the heart. "I think I'm still figuring that out," he said honestly. "What excites me the most is the opportunity to tell stories that matter, stories that resonate with people. That's the real dream." As the interview wrapped, Ethan felt a sense of pride, not because of the attention or acclaim, but because he had stayed true to himself. It was something Keanu had taught him early on. Never let the noise drown out the things that truly mattered. Later that evening, Ethan sat in his apartment, reflecting on how much his life had changed. The space was modest, but it was his, a quiet retreat from the frenzy of Hollywood. On the coffee table lay a script for his next project, one he had been personally offered by a director he deeply admired. He flipped through the pages, already immersed in the character. This role was unlike anything he had done before, a challenging and deeply emotional part that would require him to push himself further than ever. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, but Ethan knew he was ready. The phone buzzed beside him, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Keanu. "Saw the interview. You did great. Proud of you." Ethan smiled, typing back quickly. "Thanks. Couldn't have done any of this without you." Keanu's reply came almost instantly. "You did it all. I just gave you a nudge. Keep going." As the months passed, Ethan dove headfirst into his new role, spending long hours on set and even longer hours preparing off camera. The process was grueling, but he relished every moment. Each scene felt like a chance to grow, to stretch himself creatively, and to prove, to himself more than anyone, that he belonged. On one particularly challenging day, Ethan found himself struggling with a pivotal scene. The director had asked for more intensity, but no matter how hard he tried, Ethan felt like he wasn't quite hitting the mark. Frustrated, he asked for a break and stepped outside, the cool evening air calming his racing thoughts. As he stood there, staring up at the stars, he thought about something Keanu had once told him. "It's not about perfection. It's about connection. If you're feeling it, the audience will too." Taking a deep breath, Ethan closed his eyes and let himself feel the weight of the moment. When he returned to the set, something had shifted. This time, when the cameras rolled, he let go of the need to be perfect and instead focused on being present. The scene came alive in a way it hadn't before, and when the director called cut, Ethan could see the approval in their eyes. "Whatever you just did," the director said, "keep doing it." The film wrapped weeks later, and as the cast and crew gathered for a final toast, Ethan felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. These people, this experience, it was everything he had ever hoped for and more. He raised his glass, thanking everyone for their support and camaraderie, and as the night wore on, he found himself lost in conversations about future projects and possibilities. But even amidst the excitement, Ethan remained grounded. He remembered the boy he had been just a few years ago, standing nervously on the edge of a movie set, wondering if he dared to approach his hero. That boy had taken a chance, and it had changed everything. When the film premiered months later, the response was overwhelming. Critics praised Ethan's performance, calling it raw, authentic, and a revelation. Fans flooded social media with messages of support, and for the first time, Ethan began to realize the impact of his work. But the most meaningful moment came when he received a handwritten letter from a young fan. The boy wrote about how Ethan's journey had inspired him to pursue his own dreams, despite the challenges he faced. "If you can do it," the boy wrote, "maybe I can too." Ethan kept the letter on his desk, a constant reminder of why he did what he did. It wasn't about the fame or the accolades. It was about making a difference, however small, in someone else's life. In the years that followed, Ethan continued to grow as an actor and a person. He worked on a variety of projects, from small indie films to big-budget blockbusters, each one a new adventure. He also stayed involved with his mentorship program, dedicating time and resources to helping the next generation of dreamers find their way. And through it all, Keanu remained a steady presence in his life. They didn't speak as often as they once had, both were busy with their own projects, but when they did, it was as if no time had passed. Their bond, forged in a moment of kindness and courage, remained unbreakable. One day, years later, Ethan found himself back on a movie set, this time as the lead in a film that was poised to be one of the biggest releases of the year. As he stood in front of the camera, waiting for the director to call action, he couldn't help but smile. He had come so far, and yet, in many ways, he still felt like that same boy with a dream. The difference now was that he knew those dreams were possible. And as the camera rolled and the scene began, Ethan gave it everything he had, just as he always had, knowing that every moment was an opportunity to create something meaningful. Ethan stood at the edge of the studio lot, gazing at the massive billboard promoting his latest film. His face, larger than life, stared back at him, a symbol of how far he'd come. People passing by stopped to take photos, pointing and whispering excitedly. It was surreal, almost like watching someone else's life unfold. He remembered the first time he'd seen a movie poster with Keanu Reeves on it, years before they'd met. Back then, he couldn't have imagined that one day, his name would appear alongside some of the biggest stars in the industry. And yet, here he was, living a life that once felt impossibly out of reach. As he walked onto the set of his next project, he was greeted with smiles and handshakes from the crew. They respected him not just for his talent but for his humility. Ethan had made it a point to treat everyone with kindness, no matter their role, a lesson he had learned from Keanu. He knew that a successful production wasn't just about the actors or the director. It was a team effort, and every person played a vital part. Today, they were filming an emotional scene, one that would require Ethan to tap into some of his deepest feelings. He had prepared meticulously, spending hours studying the script and working with the director to understand his character's motivations. But even with all the preparation, he felt a familiar flutter of nerves as the cameras began to roll. In the scene, Ethan's character confronted a loved one about a painful betrayal. The dialogue was raw and intense, and as he delivered his lines, he felt the emotions welling up inside him. Tears filled his eyes, and his voice cracked with genuine anguish. When the scene ended, the set was silent for a moment before the director called, "Cut." The applause that followed took Ethan by surprise. He wiped his eyes, turning to see the crew clapping and nodding in approval. The director approached him, his expression one of admiration. "That was incredible," he said. "You brought something real to that scene. I couldn't have asked for more." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Moments like these reminded him why he loved acting. It wasn't just about entertaining people, it was about telling stories that resonated, stories that made people feel something. After the shoot, Ethan sat in his trailer, scrolling through his phone. A text from Keanu popped up, how's the new project going?" Ethan smiled, typing a quick reply. "Challenging but rewarding. Just wrapped an emotional scene. I think it went well." Keanu's response came almost instantly. "That's great. Remember, the best performances come from truth. Proud of you, kid." Ethan set his phone down, feeling a surge of gratitude. Keanu had been his mentor, his guide through the highs and lows of the industry. Even as Ethan forged his own path, he knew he could always count on Keanu for support and encouragement. As the months went by, Ethan's career continued to flourish. He took on roles that challenged him, pushing himself to grow as an actor and as a person. Each project was a new adventure, a chance to explore different facets of humanity. He worked with directors and actors he had admired for years, learning from their experiences and building lasting friendships. But amidst the success, Ethan never forgot where he came from. He made regular visits to his hometown, speaking at schools and community centers about the importance of perseverance and believing in oneself. He shared his story with young dreamers, hoping to inspire them to take their own bold steps. One evening, after a particularly moving talk at a local high school, Ethan was approached by a girl who couldn't have been more than 15. She held a notebook tightly to her chest, her eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and shyness. "Mr. Parker," she began, her voice trembling, "I just wanted to say thank you. Hearing your story gave me hope. I've always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't think someone like me could ever make it. Now I think maybe I can." Ethan smiled, kneeling to her level. "You absolutely can," he said. "The most important thing is to believe in yourself and never give up. If you ever need advice, don't hesitate to reach out." He handed her a card with his email address, knowing how much it would have meant to him at her age to have someone believe in his potential. As she walked away, clutching the card like a precious treasure, Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what success truly meant, using his platform to lift others up. Back in Hollywood, Ethan was preparing for the release of his most ambitious project yet, a film that combined gripping drama with breathtaking action sequences. The production had been grueling, with long hours and physically demanding stunts, but Ethan had given it his all. He wanted to prove to himself and to the world that he could handle a leading role in a major blockbuster. The premiere was a star-studded event, attended by industry heavyweights, fans, and the press. As Ethan walked the red carpet, flashes from photographers lit up the night, and reporters called out questions. He felt a mixture of excitement and nerves, but he kept his composure, answering questions with the ease of someone who had grown comfortable in the spotlight. Inside the theater, Ethan sat with his parents, who had flown in for the occasion. As the lights dimmed and the movie began, he felt his heart race with anticipation. Watching himself on the big screen was still a surreal experience, but he was proud of the work he had done. The film was a triumph, earning a standing ovation from the audience. Critics praised Ethan's performance, calling it a tour de force and hailing him as one of the brightest talents of his generation. For Ethan, the validation was gratifying, but what mattered most was knowing he had poured his heart into the role. After the screening, Ethan found himself at the after-party, mingling with other actors, directors, and producers. Amid the sea of congratulatory handshakes and words of praise, he spotted Keanu standing near the bar, a glass of water in hand. Ethan made his way over, a smile spreading across his face. "Keanu," he said, extending his hand, "I'm so glad you could make it." Keanu shook his hand, his eyes twinkling with pride. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. You were incredible, Ethan. Truly." "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I owe so much of this to you." Keanu shook his head. "You owe it to yourself. You had the courage to take the first step, and you've worked hard every day since. This is your moment, Ethan. Enjoy." Ethan nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I wouldn't be here without you," he said. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I'll never forget that." Keanu placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, his expression warm. "Then pay it forward. That's the best way to honor it." As the night wore on, Ethan reflected on how far he had come and how much further he wanted to go. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth every challenge, every moment of doubt. He had found his place in the world, and he was determined to make the most of it. And as he stood in the glow of his success, surrounded by people who believed in him, Ethan knew one thing for certain: the best was yet to come.